Okay, this is a video about my favourite novel of all time, which is Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. I first read it when I was about 19 at university, and it's a novel story that stayed with me ever since. It's one of those books that when you read it, you may take an instant dislike to the thing, but if you like it, like I do, it will stay with you probably forever. It's such a powerful story; it sticks in your mind. I mean, Thomas Hardy has written a number of novels that I really like. Often quite kind of tragic novels are the ones that I like The Mayor of Casterbridge, which is a brilliant novel about a man called Michael Henchard, who's Mayor of Casterbridge, town in the southwest, in the West Country, fictional town. But Henchard is hiding a really dark secret. But I won't tell you what it is in case you want to read it. Another book, of course, is The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, which is a brilliant novel. Clym Yeobright is a brilliant character. Eustacia Vi, brilliant character. And of course, Tess the D'Urbervilles is one of my favourites as well. But none of them really, stuck in my mind as much as Jude the Obscure did. If you've never read Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, basically it's the story about a young stonemason called Jude Fawley, who's growing up in the West Country, southwest, and dreams of going to university, to Christminster University, which again is a fictional town, but it's based on Oxford. And all the while he's growing up, he harbours this dream of going to university, and he's secretly trying to learn Greek and Latin, in his spare time. Problem is, it's the 19th century. Jude the Obscure was published in 1895. And back then, of course, the chances of someone who's a stonemason's son going to university, or any working class person going to university, to Oxford or Cambridge, is very, very slim indeed. All the power of kind of social snobbery and social exclusion is against you. And one of the big themes of the novel is this kind of theme of class and social exclusion. The fact that here you have this sensitive boy who harbours this dream of going to university, when in fact, in that kind of society, he's virtually got no chance. But anyway, that's his dream. But another problem that Jude has is that he's tricked into marriage to a girl called Arabella Don. And that basically virtually scuppers his chances of getting into university. And Arabella is this coarse, common, well, perhaps common's the wrong word, but coarse, shallow, superficial girl who tricks him into marriage by basically throwing herself at him. And once he's married her, the reality then kicks in that he's basically married to this coarse individual, who shares none of his dreams whatsoever, and starts to drag him down. And it's about the idea of how a sensitive person with dreams can be dragged down by kind of mediocrity, and Arabella, bless her, is mediocrity personified. And things come to a head when she basically butchers a pig in front of him. She's a pig farmer's daughter, and this kind of comes home to him that I am incompatible with this person. Although eventually, she basically leaves him. So he ends up moving to Christminster, where he works as a stonemason, still tries learning Greek and Latin, and still sort of trying to follow his dream of getting into university. And there he meets his cousin, Sue Bridehead. And Sue is this kind of modern, free-thinking woman, for the late 19th century. She's questioning Christianity, and she's a free thinker. And to cut a long story short, she gets married to Jude's former school teacher, a man called Mr. Phillotson. But that marriage doesn't work, and in the end, Jude and Sue end up living together as lovers. And once that happens, the whole of kind of middle class society turns against them, because it's kind of breaking the kind of Victorian idea of marriage, and here they are living in sin, and Jude gets kicked out of his job, so away goes his dream of going to university again, and they end up having a couple of children. Plus, Arabella turns up and dumps another child on Jude, who was actually born after they split up, and Jude didn't know he existed. And this child is also called Jude, but he's nicknamed Little Father Time, because he can see all of life's disappointments and tragedies before him, even though he's only about 10 years old. And in the end, you get the kind of harrowing, key scene in the novel where Little Father Time hangs himself, and he hangs the two other children as well, and leaves a message saying, "Done, because we were too many." And as a result, Sue has a miscarriage and then a massive nervous breakdown, goes back to her husband, and basically is destroyed as a person by this. Or a spirit is destroyed by it, and she's convinced that it's God's judgment for them living in sin, that the children died. And in the end, she ends up living in a loveless marriage with Phillotson. Jude goes back to Arabella, which is also a loveless marriage, and in the end, Jude just takes ill and dies. And that's the basic story. Now, obviously you might be sat there thinking, what a miserable book this sounds. But arguably that's the point. What Hardy is doing is not shying away from the miseries of life, in particular the miseries of late 19th century England that can be inflicted by the nature of that society. I mean, one of the reasons that it all goes wrong for Jude and Sue is the fact that, in Victorian England, if you're living together without being married, you have the whole of kind of society against you. Had Jude not lost his job, and had they not ended up kind of moving from town to town and having no money and living in complete poverty, maybe Little Father Time wouldn't have done what he did. Another theme of the book is the negative aspects of religion. The fact that a lot of the condemnation of Jude and Sue stems from kind of religious prejudice against them, because they're not living this kind of ideal Christian lifestyle. And another theme of the book is, of course, social exclusion and class. The fact that had Jude had the educational opportunity to go to university, then he wouldn't have just been chasing this impossible dream. And Hardy at the time was basically questioning Christianity, but he had nothing to put in its place that he thought was really optimistic. Nature was indifferent to you. God doesn't exist. Christianity can be a negative social force. You could argue that these things are really bleak, but as far as Hardy is concerned, this is reality. And it is an incredibly brilliantly written novel. It's a sort of novel that should be on every A-level English syllabus, in my opinion. And it was Hardy's last novel, because it caused such a furore when it was published that he decided to give up writing novels forever, and instead just basically concentrated on writing poetry, which is brilliant as well, by the way. But he never wrote another novel after Jude the Obscure, so it's the last one, which is a real shame, because who knows where he would have gone next had he carried on writing novels. But this was the last one, and it is, in my opinion, by far the best. If you've read the novel, what I'd also recommend is the two dramatisations of it that have been made. The first one was made in about 1971 by the BBC, and it's a series, and it's got Robert Powell in it as Jude. And Robert Powell is brilliant as Jude. You can get it on DVD. The other one is the film, which was 1990s film, and that is really good as well. And that's got Christopher Eccleston as Jude, the brilliant Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, and Kate Winslet is playing Sue Bridehead. And I'd really recommend that as well. It is a brilliant film. Obviously, it chops out quite a lot from the novel because it's the nature that you can't fit everything in detail in a film, but it's still a really, really good film. And but at the end of the day, why do I think it's my favourite novel ever? First of all, because it's a sort of story that once you read it, it sticks in your mind forever. Secondly, it's about how somebody idealistic can be dragged down by mediocrity. Mediocrity in society and mediocrity in individuals like Arabella Don. It's also about social exclusion and how how destructive it can be. It's also about the forces that rage against the individual. The thing about Jude and Sue, particularly Sue at the start of the novel, is she is an individual. She's questioning society's values. But it's about the forces that then rage back against her and ultimately crush this woman's spirit. And it is a brilliant novel about those kind of themes. And if you've never read it, read it. Anyway, thanks for listening.